Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. It has been more than a week since the last votes were cast in the 2018 midterms. That was last Tuesday. But still, several big races remain unresolved at this hour. In the state of Florida, recount is ongoing. We're going to have more on that in just a minute. It's a pretty weird story. But perhaps strangest of all is what is happening right now in Georgia. The race for governor of Georgia was tight for months. You probably followed it. But it finished in the end pretty much exactly where the polls predicted it would finish. The Republican, Brian Kemp, defeated the Democrat, Stacey Abrams, by about 1.5 percentage points. In a big state, that is an awful lot of votes. For reasons she hasn't really explained, though, Stacey Abrams has refused to accept those results. Her allies are now claiming the election was stolen.
If Stacey Abrams doesn't win in Georgia, they stole it. It's clear. It's clear.
Stacey Abrams' election is being stolen from her using what I think are insidious measures to disenfranchise certain groups of people.
I know Stacey well. She was one of my really strong surrogates in the campaign. If she'd had a fair election, she already would have won.
Election fraud, that's what they're saying. And by the way, is there anyone more fraudulent than Cory Booker? Think about that. But back to election fraud. It's a serious charge, and it's telling that nobody making that charge has provided any evidence that it actually happened. No detail at all. Most remarkable of all, though, is that Hillary Clinton is one of the voices in this chorus. We keep track, and we remember Hillary's view just 2 years ago. Here's what she thought of losing candidates who claim the election is rigged.
That's horrifying. You know, every time Donald thinks things are not going in his direction, he claims whatever it is rigged against him. That is not the way our democracy works. We've been around for 240 years. We've had free and fair elections. We've accepted the outcomes when we may not have liked them. He is denigrating, he's talking down our democracy. And I, for one, am appalled.
She's appalled. You got to accept the outcomes you don't like. But it turns out that accepting outcomes you don't like is something only Republicans are required to do. Richard Nixon had an entire presidential election stolen from him by JFK in 1960. Liberals applauded when Nixon chose not to contest that election. But Democrats do not apply the same standard to themselves. When Democrats lose, there is always a reason that has nothing to do with alienating voters or getting fewer votes. It's Putin rigged the machines, the Macedonians hacked Facebook, Roger Stone sent unapproved tweets, or the perennial favorite, you're racist. All of you who didn't vote for us, you're racist, you're immoral bigots. And of course, that's what we're hearing once again now. By the way, it's a lie. America is not a racist country. It's a kind and decent country. But the left hopes that by calling you enough names, they'll bully you into giving them more power. They always try that, and sometimes it works. It might work this time. The question is, what's the cost to the country? Peter Kirsanow is a U.S. Civil Rights Commissioner, a frequent guest on the show. He joins us again tonight. Peter, thanks a lot for coming on. So first, as a factual question, this is someone who's a rigorous thinker, I think, and has been following this. Is there evidence, real evidence, that Stacey Abrams has had this election stolen from her?
There's absolutely no evidence that I think anyone's adduced. But what we're seeing here, I think, is a test run for the 2020 election. It's not merely a test run. They're doing this in this election. They've done it in previous elections, although I will say that I don't think in my nearly 2 decades on the Civil Rights Commission I've seen the intensity of the type of overt and naked racial appeals and identity politics appeals that I've seen in this election cycle. And perhaps you could go back even before the 1957 Civil Rights Act to the Deep South, Orville Faubus, Lester Maddox, George Wallace. And there's a reason for it. There are several reasons for it. But one is it works. And they're trying to delegitimize the election in advance, but it's a test run because think about how difficult it is for your average leftist to try to convince a voter that they should accept their unworkable or somehow nutty, sometimes nutty politics or policy prescriptions versus simply saying that person's a racist, that person's a bad person, all the right-thinking people know that person's a racist, and it has an ancillary effect. That is, it keeps blacks on the Democratic reservation. This is existential for the Democratic Party. They need at least 90% of the black vote just to be competitive, and even 90% plus of the black vote. And so they engage in these types of maneuvers and rhetoric on a regular basis. But the additional effect that's helpful is it makes, and I think you alluded to this, there's a certain subset of white voters who they also want to align themselves with the right-thinking folks, and they don't want to be aligned with those that all the right-thinking people say are racist or despicable. So to feel good about themselves, they'll vote in the prescribed manner.
Right. And you're absolutely right that it works, and they've been doing it an awfully long time. But I think in almost 30 years of covering elections, I've never seen it at this volume. You just a second ago said there are a couple of reasons for it. The first is it works, and I agree with you. What are the other reasons? Why is it accelerated now, do you think?
Because, I think some of it is because the policy think about how far the Democrats have gone to the left. And it's difficult to get more than a certain percentage of voters to align themselves with those kinds of policy prescriptions. It's a lot easier to comprehend an appeal based on identity politics. If, for example, what's her name, Alexandria Cortez were to go out and try to convince a voter how it is that extending Medicare to all or free college tuition is not going to bankrupt the economy, even most obtuse voter is going to laugh her off of the stage.
Right.
It's a lot easier to say, vote for me because I am of whatever identity it may be, and make an appeal on that basis and have media acolytes continue to echo that on a regular basis. A significant portion of this is because of Donald Trump and the continued attempts to paint Donald Trump and anyone who supports him as a racist. In some respects, it has been successful. I think it's backfired in other respects. But you're seeing something that they're going to test out big time in 2020.
Yeah. No, I think that's really smart. Thank you for making sense of that. Peter Kirsanow, one of our favorite guests.
Thanks, Tucker.